Paranormal Encounters at Abandoned Hospitals for a Soothing Night. For the best experience, put on your headphones and listen closely. Some things are only heard in the silence of the night. If you find yourself holding your breath at any point in this story, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you're ready for more tales that haunt the night, subscribe to Dr. Scary Tales for new videos every week. The old St. Mary's Hospital stood on the outskirts of town, shrouded in whispers and legends that had been passed down for generations. It was a monolith of red brick and broken windows, towering against the backdrop of a starless sky. Ivy crawled up its walls like skeletal fingers reaching toward the heavens, and the once bright letters spelling emergency entrance were now faded and peeling. As I approached the building, the air grew thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something metallic, like old blood. The wind rustled through the overgrown weeds, producing a soft hiss that seemed to whisper secrets I wasn't meant to hear. Every footstep echoed against the cracked pavement, the sound swallowed almost immediately by the oppressive silence that enveloped the place. The front doors hung ajar, creaking softly as they swayed with the breeze. Inside, the darkness was nearly impenetrable. Shadows danced along the corridors, cast by the faint moonlight filtering through the shattered skylights above. The peeling wallpaper revealed layers of forgotten colors, each telling its own story of decay. Rusted gurneys and wheelchairs lay abandoned, their wheels frozen in time. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. Dust particles floated in the air, illuminated like tiny stars in a forgotten galaxy. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant drip of water and the occasional scurry of unseen creatures. The smell of antiseptic lingered, a haunting reminder of the lives that had passed through these halls. Why was I here? That question had plagued me since I decided to return to my hometown. After years of chasing a career that left me empty, I'd come back seeking closure or perhaps redemption. My sister Emily had disappeared from this very hospital 10 years ago. She was a nurse, working the night shift when she vanished without a trace. The authorities had searched every inch of this place, but found nothing. No leads, no suspects, just an unsolved mystery that tore my family apart. Guilt gnawed at me. I had been too absorbed in my own life to notice her distress calls, the late-night messages, the cryptic voicemails about things she couldn't explain. Now it was my turn to face whatever had taken her from me. I needed answers, and if that meant confronting the shadows of St. Mary's, so be it. As I ventured deeper into the hospital, the corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting and turning like a labyrinth designed to confound intruders. The walls were adorned with outdated medical charts and faded photographs of smiling staff, a stark contrast to the emptiness that now consumed the place. I passed by the pediatric ward, the rooms filled with tiny beds and colorful murals that had long since lost their vibrancy. A soft melody drifted through the air, a piano playing somewhere in the distance. It was a gentle tune, familiar and soothing. My heart beat steadily as I followed the sound, each note guiding me deeper into the hospital. This feels surreal, I whispered to myself. Who could be playing music here? The music led me to the old auditorium. The double doors were slightly open, a gentle light seeping through the gap. I pushed them open gently. Inside, the grand piano stood on the stage, its keys moving as if played by unseen hands. The sheet music fluttered softly despite the still air. My throat tightened. Was this a dream? Was my mind playing tricks on me? "Hello?" I called out. my voice echoing gently in the vast space. The music stopped, leaving a peaceful silence. Then, a child's laughter echoed from the upper balconies, sending a gentle shiver down my spine. I shone my flashlight upwards but saw nothing. "Who's there?" I asked softly, trying to keep my voice calm. No response came, only the gentle creaking of old wood settling. I backed out of the auditorium, my instincts urging me to leave, but a part of me, the part that sought understanding, encouraged me to continue. I made my way to the nurse's station on the 3rd floor, where Emily used to spend her nights. The desk was cluttered with outdated files and a coffee mug bearing the hospital's logo. I picked it up, running my fingers over the cracked ceramic. Memories flooded back. Emily's laughter, her stories about stubborn patients, her dreams of traveling the world. A sudden gust of wind swept through the corridor, papers flying off the desk and swirling around me. The overhead lights flickered to life, one by one, casting an eerie glow. "This isn't possible," I muttered. The electricity had been shut off years ago. Footsteps echoed from around the corner, slow, deliberate steps approaching me. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering in my chest. A shadow appeared at the end of the hallway, a tall figure in a long coat, face obscured by darkness. "Emily," I whispered, hope mingling with fear. The figure tilted its head, as if acknowledging me. Then it turned and walked away, disappearing through a set of double doors that led to the surgical wing. I hesitated before following. Each step was heavier than the last. The surgical wing was colder. The air was sharp and biting. Surgical instruments lay scattered on trays, their metal surfaces gleaming under the flickering lights. The operating rooms had large observation windows, now cracked and clouded. I peered into one and froze. On the operating table lay a figure covered with a white sheet, a tag attached to the toe protruding from underneath. Compelled by a force I couldn't resist, I entered the room. The door closed behind me with a soft click. I approached the table, each step echoing loudly. My trembling hand reached for the sheet. As I pulled it back, I gasped. It was me, pale and lifeless, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. I stumbled backward, knocking over a tray of instruments. They clattered loudly, the sound reverberating in the confined space. Panic surged through me. "This isn't real. It's a nightmare," I told myself, squeezing my eyes shut. A whisper filled the room, soft and indistinct at first, then growing louder. "You shouldn't have come," it said. I spun around to see Emily standing in the corner, her face expressionless, eyes hollow. "Emily, is it really you?" I cried out. "You left me here," she replied, her voice echoing unnaturally. "Now, it's your turn." The lights flickered violently before going out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. I fumbled for my flashlight, but it wouldn't turn on. The whispers grew louder, multiplying and surrounding me. Hands, cold and unseen, grasped at my arms and legs. I screamed, thrashing desperately to free myself. Somehow I broke free and burst out of the operating room. Sprinting down the corridor, the hospital was transforming around me, the walls oozing dark stains. Doors slamming shut as I passed. The whispers followed. A cacophony of voices pleading, accusing, mocking. I reached the stairwell and practically leapt down the steps, nearly losing my footing. As I hit the ground floor, I raced toward the entrance. But the front doors were no longer open. They were sealed, chained from the outside. "No, no, no," I shouted, pulling at the chains to no avail. A sinister laughter echoed behind me. I turned to see the tall figure from before, and now joined by others. shadowy silhouettes closing in. Their eyes glowed faintly, fixed on me. Desperate, I darted down a side corridor, finding myself in the morgue. The rows of cold chambers lined the walls, each one with a small window fogged from the inside. The temperature plummeted. My breath came out in visible puffs. "There's nowhere to run," Emily's voice whispered in my ear. "Why are you doing this?" I screamed. "You need to understand," she replied. "You can't escape the past." The chamber doors began to open one by one, the metal groaning. From each, a figure emerged. Patients, doctors, nurses, all with the same hollow eyes. They advanced slowly, but blocking any escape. I backed into a corner, my mind racing. "This isn't real. It's all in my head," I repeated, shutting my eyes tight. When I opened them, the figures were gone. The morgue was empty. The silence was suffocating. I sank to the floor, relief washing over me. Maybe it was over. A hand rested on my shoulder. I looked up to see Emily, her eyes now filled with sadness. "You can't leave," she said softly. "Please, let me go." I begged. She shook her head. "It's too late." The floor beneath me gave way, and I was falling into darkness. I landed in a room, a bedroom, my bedroom. Morning light filtered through the curtains. Was it all a dream? I sat up in bed, drenched in sweat. Relief flooded me. It was just a nightmare, I sighed. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," I called out. The door creaked open, but no one was there. A familiar scent filled the room, the metallic smell from the hospital. My heart sank. From behind the door, a shadow stretched across the floor, growing longer, reaching toward me. I realized then that I hadn't escaped. The hospital had followed me home, its shadows seeping into my reality. Every night since, I hear them, the whispers, the footsteps, the laughter. I try to tell myself it's nothing, but deep down I know the truth. I brought something back with me, and now it won't let me go. If that story left you with a chill, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you're feeling brave enough for more, subscribe to Dr. Scary Tales for new stories. If you thought this was scary, wait until you hear what I have coming next. Let's just say you might not want to listen to this one alone, but as unsettling as that story was, it's not the only one I know. Let me tell you another, one that's even stranger. The story begins on a foggy evening, as I stood at the edge of Blackwater Bay. The old ferry dock stretched out before me, its wooden planks creaking under the weight of time. My destination loomed in the distance, a silhouette of crumbling towers and spires against the darkening sky. Ravenswood Asylum, an abandoned psychiatric hospital perched on a secluded island, had been calling to me ever since I first heard the legends. The locals in the nearby town of Ashgrove refused to speak of it. Whenever I mentioned the asylum, their faces would pale, and they'd find excuses to end the conversation. But as a freelance photographer with a penchant for the eerie and forgotten, I was drawn to places like this. The stories, the mysteries, they were all part of the allure. I checked my watch, 6:45 p.m. The last light of day was slipping away, and the ferry I had arranged, a small rusted boat piloted by a man named Thomas, was nowhere to be seen. The air was thick with the scent of salt water and damp wood. A cold breeze whispered through the reeds along the shoreline, carrying with it a sense of unease. Just as I began to doubt whether Thomas would show, a faint chugging sound broke through the mist. His boat emerged from the fog like a ghost ship, lanterns flickering weakly at the bow. "You're sure about this?" he called out as he approached the dock. "Absolutely," I replied, hoisting my backpack and camera gear. Thomas shook his head. "Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you. No one goes to Ravenswood after dark. Not anyone with sense, anyway." I offered a weak smile and stepped onto the unsteady vessel. The journey across the bay was silent, save for the rhythmic splashing of the waves against the hull. Thomas seemed eager to get me to the island and be rid of his duty. As we neared the rocky shore, the asylum came into full view. Ravenswood Asylum was a sprawling complex of Victorian-era buildings, their once grand architecture now surrendered to decay. Ivy clung to the stone walls, and shattered windows stared out like empty eyes. The main building featured a clock tower, its hands frozen at precisely 2:15. I made a mental note of the time, 7:05 p.m., as I stepped off the boat. "I'll be back at dawn," Thomas said curtly. "Be ready." Before I could respond, he was already pushing off, disappearing back into the mist. Alone now. I made my way up the overgrown path leading to the asylum's entrance. The ground was soggy. Each step released the earthy scent of wet leaves and moss. Shadows stretched long in the fading light, and the only sounds were the distant cries of seabirds and the rustling of the wind through the trees. The massive wooden doors of the asylum were ajar, one hanging precariously from its hinges. I paused at the threshold, peering into the dim interior. The air inside was colder, carrying a stale odor of dust and neglect. I clicked on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness to reveal a grand foyer. A tarnished chandelier hung from the ceiling, and a red carpet, faded and moth-eaten, led deeper into the building. I began snapping photos, the flash illuminating glimpses of the past, a nurse's station with papers still scattered across the desk, wheelchairs left abandoned in the hallways, and faded murals depicting serene landscapes that contrasted sharply with the building's grim atmosphere. As I ventured further, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Several times, I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadow darting just beyond the flashlight's reach, or a curtain swaying where there was no breeze. "It's just your imagination," I told myself, focusing on the task at hand. I reached the central courtyard, where a twisted oak tree stood in the center of a dry fountain. The moon peeked through the clouds, casting an ethereal glow over the scene. I took a moment to rest, reviewing the photos I'd taken so far. That's when I noticed something odd. In one of the images of a long corridor, there was a figure at the far end, a blurry silhouette that hadn't been there when I took the shot. A chill ran down my spine. I enlarged the photo on the camera's screen, trying to make out details, but it was too grainy. "Probably a trick of the light," I muttered, though unease was settling in. I decided to explore the upper floors. The stairwell was narrow, with steps that groaned under my weight. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips, and graffiti marred the surfaces, messages like "Leave now" and "They are listening." At the second floor landing, I found a row of patient rooms. Most were empty, their doors gaping open like silent mouths. But one at the end of the hall was closed, a rusty padlock hanging from the latch. Curiosity got the better of me. I searched nearby and found a loose piece of metal, a broken curtain rod that I used to pry at the lock. With a satisfying snap, it gave way. I pushed the door open and was hit by a gust of frigid air. Inside, the room was untouched by time, and the bed was neatly made and a child's doll resting on the pillow. The wallpaper, a delicate pattern of flowers, was pristine compared to the decay elsewhere. I lifted the doll, a porcelain figure with glass eyes and a faded dress. As I examined it, a music box somewhere in the room began to play a haunting lullaby. I froze. The melody was soft, almost soothing, but entirely out of place. I set the doll down and searched for the source of the music, but found nothing. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. I rushed to it, jiggling the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in. "Hello?" I shouted. Is someone there?" My voice echoed in the small room. A whisper responded, so faint I thought I might have imagined it. "Why did you come?" it asked. My heart pounded. "Who are you?" I demanded. Silence. Then the mirror on the wall began to fog up, as if someone were breathing on it. Words slowly appeared in the condensation. "Help us!" I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the rug and falling to the floor. The music box ceased abruptly, plunging the room into an oppressive quiet. Gathering my courage, I stood up and threw my weight against the door. It burst open, and I stumbled into the hallway. Breathing heavily, I decided it was time to leave. This wasn't worth it. As I made my way back toward the stairs, the building seemed to come alive. Doors that had been open were now closed. The corridor stretched longer than before, each step echoing louder. The air grew thick, making it hard to breathe. I reached the stairwell only to find the steps leading down were gone, collapsed into a dark void. "This can't be happening," I whispered. I looked up, and the stairs above seemed intact. Perhaps there was another way down from the higher floors. Climbing hastily, I reached the third floor. This level was different. The walls were lined with old photographs in ornate frames. I paused to look at them. They were portraits of patients and staff, all staring directly ahead with vacant expressions. As I moved down the hall, the eyes in the photographs seemed to follow me. A door at the end was slightly ajar, warm light spilling out. Desperate for an exit, I headed toward it. Inside was a large room that appeared to be a common area. Chairs were arranged in a circle, and a grand fireplace crackled with life. Sitting in the chairs were shadowy figures, their features obscured. "Welcome," a voice said. It belonged to a man who stood by the fireplace, his back to me. "Please, I just want to leave," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned slowly. His face was pale, eyes sunken deep into his skull. "But you've only just arrived," he replied with a grin that sent shivers through me. The shadowy figures began to rise from their chairs, turning toward me. Their faces were distorted, features melting and shifting. I backed away, reaching for the door, but it slammed shut on its own. "Stay with us," they whispered in unison, their voices weaving together in a dissonant harmony. I fumbled for anything I could use as a weapon, my hand closing around a metal candlestick on a nearby table. "Stay back!" I shouted, swinging it wildly. The figures advanced, unfazed. The man by the fireplace began to laugh, a hollow, echoing sound that seemed to reverberate within my very bones. In a surge of adrenaline, I hurled the candlestick at the window behind me. The glass shattered, and cold night air rushed in. Without thinking, I climbed through the opening, the jagged edges cutting into my hands and arms. I found myself on a narrow ledge, 3 stories above the ground. The wind howled around me, threatening to knock me off balance. Below, the rocky terrain offered little hope for a safe landing. Behind me, the laughter grew louder. The shadowy figures were gathering at the broken window, their elongated arms reaching out. With no other choice, I edged along the ledge, hoping to find a fire escape or another way down. Rain began to fall, making the stones slick under my feet. I spotted a drain pipe leading to the ground, a tenuous escape route, but my only option. I gripped the pipe and began my descent. About halfway down, the rusted metal gave way with a screech, and I plummeted the remaining distance. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting through my ankle. Gritting my teeth, I forced myself to stand. Limping, I made my way toward the shoreline. The boat was gone. Thomas wouldn't be back until dawn. Despair threatened to consume me, but then I remembered the small boathouse I'd seen earlier near the docks. The boathouse was dilapidated, but inside I found an old rowboat, miraculously still seaworthy. I pushed it into the water and began to row with all the strength I had left. As I put distance between myself and the island, the asylum loomed over the water, its windows glowing with an unnatural light. I heard whispers carried across the waves, a chorus of voices calling my name. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Startled, I pulled it out. A notification popped up. 2:15 a.m., no service. The battery icon blinked red before the screen went black. The same time as the frozen clock in the asylum. The same time that seemed to hold some significance I couldn't fathom. Exhausted, I continued to row until the island was nothing more than a dark shape against the horizon. The whispers faded, replaced by the sound of water lapping against the boat. I reached the mainland as the first light of dawn crept into the sky. Collapsing on the shore, I looked back toward Ravenswood. For a moment, I thought I saw figures standing on the island's edge, watching me. I blinked, and they were gone. I returned to Ashgrove, hoping to find solace, but the town felt different. Streets that were once familiar now seemed foreign. People avoided my gaze, and whispers followed me wherever I went. When I developed the photos from my camera, I found more of those unsettling images, figures in the shadows, faces appearing in windows, all watching me. In every photograph, the same man from the fireplace stood somewhere in the frame, his eyes locking onto mine. Sleep eludes me now every night at exactly 2:15 a.m. I wake to the sound of that haunting lullaby and the whispers of voices that shouldn't be there. I fear that I didn't escape Ravenswood after all, that a part of me is still trapped there, or perhaps something followed me back. If you've ever felt the pull of places better left forgotten, heed my warning. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. If this tale left you with goosebumps, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you've ever had an experience you can't quite explain, just share it in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story.